My name is Yemi Awosile and I'm a textile artist. I'm working with the William Morris Gallery and Liberty Fabrics to design a new collection of scarves inspired by the artist Althea McNish. So I feel connected to Althea McNish's work for a number of reasons. Mostly because of her training in textile design when we studied on the same course, but also because of the way that she was able to move between different mediums. So starting off with material like textiles and working with print, but then also working with other mediums on different scales, whether that be for fashion or interiors, and that's something that I've really embodied within my own work. And so to see that within another designer from an earlier generation is something that's really important to me. I guess it's also about her experimental approach to colour. I really love the fact that colour and her use of mark making was very, very distinctive and very striking for that age, for that time. And Althea McNish often worked in a way which was kind of unique to her own particular studio practice, and it wasn't seen in many other designers at the time. And I think that idea of trying to find your own personal language is something that's really important when it comes to seeing yourself as a designer or an artist and trying to develop your own particular practice. So whilst I was looking at Althea McNish's work, I was also thinking about what my approach would be to developing like a new body of work. So colour is something that's really important to her, and for me, colour has a very symbolic representation and importance. So one of the colour palettes that I wanted to really include was this kind of like indigo natural colour palette. So as well as looking at her work, I took inspiration from these are swatches of fabrics which were hand dyed in Nigeria. So I often use Nigerian cotton as a base to work on, and I'm interested in it because of where it comes from as a material, but then also the relevance of this colour as a symbolism of culture. I find that really fascinating, and so it's a colour palette that I really wanted to incorporate into my own work. So I use these are, I guess, contemporary fabrics which come from a very traditional origin, and I also looked at much older fabrics design. So these are much older fabric prints from Nigeria which also use a similar process of dyeing with indigo to create surface prints. But the thing also that drew me to this approach was this idea of creating like a map using printed pattern. So here, this is like almost like a map of a landscape. And so I was using this to almost think about how I would then create a composition of my own. So thinking about how the eye would be drawn to different parts of the fabric. So playing about with like different arrangements of very, very simple patterns. So although that this is a design that's been printed onto silk, I always want that cultural heritage and that kind of like that history to be visible in the work. And so often I start off with really, really simple drawings. So my favourite medium to work with is inks. So just as a starting point, just ink and pencil. So I'll quickly, just really very, very loosely, without even thinking too hard about what it is that I'm creating, think about the mood that I want to create. And then often I may use that whole composition to create a design, or I might just isolate just one particular part of a drawing, and then that I can translate into like a digital image, which then becomes like a more composed design. But it's almost like a pick and mix effect. So working with lots of different processes, starting with drawing, photography, sketching, collage. So here I'm working with just like scraps of paper that I find around the studio, and I'm a bit of a hoarder, so I'll collect fabrics and scraps of paper, and then later on incorporate that into a design, and then paint up colour swatches to then create my final colour palette for my design. So it's kind of a very playful approach to designing textiles, and I think Althea also has a very playful, excitable approach to her work, and I really hope that that comes through in my final design.